I can't do this anymore, Samantha whispered to herself as the elevator doors closed, the soft hum of the machinery masking the rapid beat of her heart. And in that instant she felt a strange mixture of liberation and fear as the city skyline stretched endlessly beyond the glass walls of the building, the evening sun casting long golden reflections across the polished floors and the crowded streets below. She gripped the strap of her bag tightly, feeling the warmth of her unborn child pressed gently against her hand, each breath steadying her as if reminding her that even in the face of betrayal, she still had a choice, and every decision mattered. Her thoughts drifted back to the morning when she had heard Ethan laughing down the hall with someone else, a sharp reminder of the years she had invested silently, supporting his empire while often being overlooked. And yet, in that very neglect, she had discovered an unexpected reservoir of strength, a quiet power that had remained unnoticed, hidden beneath layers of patience and careful planning. And as the doors opened onto the bustling street, Samantha stepped forward, heels clicking against the marble steps, drawing curious glances from passers-by who could not see the storm of thoughts swirling inside her mind. She moved with purpose, each step deliberate, as though rehearsed for this exact moment, the city lights beginning to flicker on one by one, painting the streets in vibrant hues of orange and blue, reflecting the contradictions of her life, the warmth and cold, the hope and disappointment. She could hear the distant hum of traffic, feel the gentle breeze against her cheeks, and in that moment, she realized the elevator ride had been more than a transition in space. It had been a shift in perspective, a turning point where she acknowledged her own value and the hidden power she had long carried without acknowledgement. She passed a small park where children played, laughter ringing clear and untroubled. And for a fleeting second, Samantha allowed herself a small smile, imagining a future where her choices were guided by her own terms rather than the whims of a man who had underestimated her. And as she walked past a cafe, the rich scent of coffee mingling with the crisp evening air, she felt the pulse of the city sync with her own heartbeat, each step carrying her further from the shadows of neglect and closer to a path where intelligence, patience, and determination could be wielded like instruments of quiet revolution. She crossed the street, noting the pattern of lights at the intersection, the rhythm almost musical, reinforcing the idea that even chaos had structure, that even endings contained the seed of new beginnings. And when she reached the black sedan waiting discreetly around the corner, a figure holding a portfolio of documents slid the door open silently. Nodding once with an expression of calm assurance, Samantha stepped inside, feeling the leather seat warm beneath her, the car's engine humming steadily as it began to move through the streets illuminated by neon signs and reflective glass. The air filled with potential and the unspoken promise that tonight was not an end but the beginning of a carefully orchestrated ascent. As the car glided past the towering buildings, Samantha closed her eyes briefly, inhaling deeply, letting the reality of her independence and the latent power she had discovered settle fully within her. And in the back of her mind, a single thought repeated over and over. The world had overlooked her for too long, but from this moment forward, she would be seen. The city lights blurred past the car windows as Samantha leaned back, feeling the steady hum of the engine beneath her, her fingers tracing the edge of the portfolio resting on the seat beside her, each page filled with the kind of information that could shift power and influence in ways Ethan would never anticipate. She thought about the boardroom meetings she had attended silently for years, contributing ideas that were never credited, witnessing deals being closed while her own insight was overlooked. And now, armed with knowledge and patience, she could turn those years of invisibility into a decisive advantage, the soft leather of the seat against her hand grounding her in the moment, while the future unfolded with limitless possibility, the car turning down quiet streets, passing boutiques and cafes where people were oblivious to the drama unraveling just blocks away. And Samantha allowed herself to feel the mix of anticipation and control as she planned each step, her mind moving faster than the tires on the asphalt, analyzing, calculating, imagining the sequence of events that would lead to recognition, power, and respect she had always deserved. She recalled the mornings spent preparing reports for Ethan, the evenings spent quietly correcting errors in financial models, The way her suggestions had been dismissed politely yet firmly, and now, seeing the potential for reversal, she felt a thrill that was both strategic and personal. The city passing in a mosaic of reflections on rain-slicked streets, neon signs flickering against the darkening sky, mirroring the complex patterns of her plans and the subtle but undeniable influence she was about to assert. The gentle motion of the car almost hypnotic as she considered each upcoming encounter, each conversation, and each reveal that would allow her to assert the hidden authority she had long cultivated. Samantha's gaze shifted to the rearview mirror, catching glimpses of pedestrians moving hurriedly through the evening, unaware of the quiet revolution taking place in a black sedan gliding through the metropolis. And with every block, she rehearsed the words she would say, the calm authority she would exude, the patience that would make her appear untouchable, and the timing that would maximize the impact of her revelation, the soft click of the seatbelt serving as a metronome to her thoughts, a reminder that preparation was as important as execution. She considered the offices Ethan frequented, the social circles that never acknowledged her, the layers of influence that could be activated through careful disclosure. And she felt the satisfaction of knowing that what had been ignored for so long would soon be recognized, not with loud confrontation, but with the subtle, undeniable weight of knowledge and presence. The streets curving gently as the car approached a familiar building, the kind of place where deals were made, power was measured, and reputation was currency. And Samantha, with her hand resting lightly on her growing belly, allowed a slow, confident breath to settle in her chest, acknowledging the duality of her role as both mother and strategist, knowing that every decision, every step, and every revelation would be observed, considered, and ultimately respected. And as the car slowed to a stop, the soft hiss of the brakes blending with the distant city sounds, she felt a quiet sense of anticipation, a readiness to step out and into the world she had patiently prepared for, a world where her voice, her insight, and her presence could no longer be overlooked. And in that moment, Samantha Blake understood fully that the power she had cultivated in silence was ready to emerge. The car came to a gentle stop outside a sleek office building, the glass facade reflecting the warm amber glow of the setting sun as Samantha adjusted her coat and stepped onto the pavement, each footfall deliberate and steady, her gaze scanning the surroundings for any sign of distraction or interruption, the city humming quietly around her. Unaware of the quiet storm of plans about to unfold inside, she entered the lobby, the polished floors gleaming under the soft overhead lighting, the faint scent of fresh flowers from a corner arrangement mingling with the subtle aroma of coffee from a nearby cafe, grounding her in the present while her mind raced through every detail of the upcoming confrontation, reviewing the documents that held the keys to the influence she had long cultivated. She moved with the confidence of someone who had walked these corridors in her imagination countless times, knowing exactly where each conversation, each reveal, would make the greatest impact. The receptionist offered a polite smile as Samantha passed, her presence commanding attention without a word, a quiet acknowledgement of her authority and composure. And as she rode the elevator up to the executive floor, the hum of the cables and the subtle vibrations beneath her feet seemed to echo the rhythm of her heartbeat, steady, purposeful, aware that in these moments, perception was as powerful as action. The doors opened onto a corridor lined with sleek glass offices, the faint reflection of her poised silhouette stretching across the panels, and she walked with a quiet determination, imagining each step as part of a carefully choreographed performance that would leave no doubt about her capability and strategic acumen. She approached the conference room where Ethan was scheduled to meet with key stakeholders, her mind rehearsing the calm, authoritative tone she would adopt, the precise sequence of disclosures that would command respect and demonstrate the depth of her insight, the gentle click of her heels on the polished floor punctuating each measured thought, the anticipation building as she prepared to enter a space where power, perception, and timing were paramount. As she paused briefly to take a deep breath, the late afternoon sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows casting long shadows across the room, Samantha centered herself, feeling the strength of her convictions and the knowledge that her presence alone could shift the balance. Every gesture, every word considered and intentional, and as the conference room door opened before her, she stepped inside, calm, composed, yet alive with energy, her eyes meeting those of the key figures in the room, her hand resting lightly on the portfolio, ready to reveal the insights and information that would make them sit up and take notice. And in that moment, the air seemed charged with quiet anticipation, every subtle movement and glance layered with meaning, a poised demonstration of the strategic advantage she had meticulously prepared for. And as she spoke her first words, measured and confident, the room responded, a subtle shift in attention and awareness signaling that her carefully constructed presence was beginning to command the space. And Samantha knew that the seeds of recognition, respect, and influence she had planted over years of quiet observation and preparation were now ready to bloom. As Samantha continued speaking, the room shifted subtly, the attention of each person in the conference room narrowing on her words, her voice steady yet compelling, articulating the data, insights, and untapped opportunities she had meticulously compiled over months, the documents in her hand providing concrete evidence of her expertise and foresight. She noticed heads nodding slowly, eyes widening slightly as the depth of her knowledge and the precision of her analysis became clear, the quiet authority she projected resonating through the space, transforming initial curiosity into a palpable respect. And she felt a calm satisfaction as she guided the conversation, each point building on the last, revealing the breadth of her understanding, her strategic thinking, and her vision for what could be achieved if her recommendations were followed. And while Ethan remained in the room, seated at the far end of the table, his expression shifting from initial skepticism to concern, he realized that the woman he had underestimated was commanding the attention and trust of everyone present. The subtle yet undeniable change in dynamics emphasizing that power and influence were not always dictated by title or outward presence, but by preparation, insight, and timing. Samantha moved with purposeful gestures, flipping through the portfolio with a smooth confidence, referencing charts, reports, and carefully annotated notes, each element reinforcing her credibility and ensuring that her perspective could not be dismissed. And as she paused to answer a question, her eyes scanned the room, noting the silent acknowledgement from key decision-makers, their body language signaling alignment with her points. And in that moment, she felt a surge of clarity and determination, the culmination of years of careful observation and quiet preparation manifesting in tangible results. She outlined potential courses of action with precision, presenting not only solutions but contingencies, demonstrating foresight that left no room for doubt about her capabilities. And as the discussion drew toward a natural pause, Samantha allowed herself a subtle, controlled smile, recognizing the shift she had orchestrated, the quiet affirmation of her strategic authority settling over the room. And as she gathered the documents, the soft rustle of paper accompanying her measured movements, she understood fully that this was more than a victory in a single meeting. It was the affirmation of her latent influence, the validation of her patience and insight, and a clear signal that the landscape of decision-making had changed, with her voice and vision now central to future direction. And as the elevator doors closed behind her when she eventually left, the subtle hum of the building and the muted chatter in the corridor serving as a quiet backdrop, Samantha walked with a sense of controlled momentum, her thoughts already turning toward the next steps, knowing that the groundwork laid in this single encounter would ripple outward, establishing her presence, authority, and strategic importance in ways that would be recognized long after she had left the room. And the evening sun outside painted the city in warm tones, reflecting a sense of accomplishment, resilience, and readiness for the challenges and opportunities yet to come, while in her mind, a clear understanding remained that her careful orchestration of knowledge, timing, and presence had positioned her not only as a participant but as a driver of outcomes, setting the stage for the next phase of influence, respect, and acknowledgement. The evening air carried a gentle chill as Samantha exited the building, her steps measured and purposeful on the polished stone sidewalk, the soft glow of street lamps reflecting off the wet pavement after a brief drizzle, each reflection seeming to mirror the careful planning and foresight that had guided her through the meeting. She could feel the energy of the city around her, the distant hum of traffic and the murmur of pedestrians blending into a rhythm that matched the steady beat of her heart. She glanced at the sleek black sedan waiting unobtrusively across the street, the vehicle blending into the urban backdrop while promising both discretion and mobility. And as she approached it, Samantha allowed herself a moment to observe the people she passed, noting the subtle expressions of curiosity and fleeting acknowledgement of her confidence. The way her posture and composure suggested authority without demanding attention, and it struck her that influence often manifested in subtle gestures, in the perception others held of her, as much as in overt statements or decisions. Sliding into the leather seat, she rested her hand on the portfolio beside her, feeling the reassuring weight of documents that represented both preparation and possibility, each page containing the potential to shift perspectives and alignments in the circles that mattered. The soft purr of the engine beneath her feet providing a grounding cadence as the car merged into traffic, weaving through avenues and boulevards illuminated by neon signs and reflections on the buildings, the city alive with movement. While she planned her next steps with methodical clarity, she reviewed the strategic points in her mind, imagining each conversation, each revelation, each carefully chosen word, anticipating reactions, and recalibrating her approach for maximum effect. The portfolio held not only information but leverage, insight, and the subtle power that comes from understanding details that others overlook, and Samantha knew that by combining patience with timing, she could ensure that her influence extended beyond the meeting room and into decisions, directions, and perceptions that shaped outcomes on a broader scale. As the car slowed for a light, she allowed herself a brief reflection on the years of quiet work, of observations made in boardrooms, during presentations, and in moments when her contributions were ignored. She recognized that those moments of invisibility had provided her with a perspective that others did not possess, a vantage point that allowed her to anticipate moves and counter moves. The city lights streaking past the windows providing a dynamic backdrop to her thoughts. She imagined the reception that would greet her next engagement, the subtle shifts in attention, the recognition of capability and poise that would follow her presence, every detail calculated to assert her authority while maintaining composure. She thought about the potential conversations and negotiations that awaited, and the influence she could exert not through force but through demonstration of knowledge, insight, and the quiet confidence of someone who understood the rules and the levers that controlled outcomes. And as the car pulled to a stop outside a familiar landmark, Samantha drew in a deep breath, feeling the duality of anticipation and control, the readiness to step into a space where presence alone could alter dynamics. And she adjusted the portfolio slightly, the leather edges warm under her fingers, reaffirming her preparedness. And with a final glance at the illuminated street behind her, she opened the door, stepping into the night with confidence, aware that every move, every gesture, and every choice made in the coming moments would reinforce her position, her influence, and her undeniable presence, setting the stage for the next phase of recognition, respect, and strategic impact. The elevator doors opened quietly onto the upper floor of the corporate suite, Samantha stepping out with a measured grace, the soft hum of air conditioning blending with the faint murmur of activity beyond the glass walls, her eyes scanning the room for the subtle reactions of colleagues and executives as she approached, each glance and posture a clue to their perception and expectations. And she allowed herself a brief mental note of the dynamics at play, the ways in which influence and attention were distributed, observing the interplay between authority and hesitation, experience and assumption. She moved toward the large conference table where prepared documents and digital presentations awaited, each item meticulously organized to guide the flow of discussion, her posture calm, yet commanding. The slight adjustment of her coat and careful placement of her portfolio, signaling both professionalism and intention, the quiet rhythm of her steps matching the pulse of anticipation, building in the room. And as she began to outline her analysis, she spoke with clarity, precision, and a controlled energy that drew listeners in, her words structured to highlight insight, foresight, and actionable strategies. The room responding with subtle shifts of focus and alignment, heads nodding, eyes narrowing thoughtfully, a sense of engagement and measured respect rippling through the audience. Samantha allowed pauses that reinforced the weight of her points, the timing creating space for reflection and consideration of her ideas. She referenced charts, metrics, and prior case studies with seamless fluency, each example chosen to reinforce her credibility and underscore the depth of her preparation. The subtle confidence in her tone reinforcing the impression of authority and competence. And as she moved through the presentation, she noticed the slight but telling gestures of acknowledgement, hands reaching for notes, pens poised over notebooks, the shifting of chairs toward her, a natural gravitation toward the source of insight and direction. And in the midst of the dialogue, Samantha maintained an unbroken calm, her awareness spanning both content and context, each interaction measured, each response considered, and the quiet power of observation amplifying the influence of her presence. She interwove data with strategic narrative, connecting factual insight with actionable guidance. Her articulation clear and concise, yet layered with nuance, demonstrating understanding of both immediate outcomes and longer-term implications. The interplay of her spoken words and the silent weight of her prepared materials creating a compelling balance. The room fully engaged yet unaware of the subtle orchestration underlying the flow of conversation. Samantha guiding perception and attention with an intuitive understanding of timing, emphasis, and resonance. And as the session continued, the gradual acknowledgement of her authority became evident, the energy in the room subtly shifting to accommodate and respect her position, the rhythm of engagement accelerating with interest and consideration. And by the time she concluded the presentation, the reception was clear, a collective recognition of capability and insight, the soft ambient sounds of the suite, the faint whir of projectors, and the distant city traffic outside providing a measured backdrop to the emergence of Samantha's quiet influence. And as she gathered her materials and prepared to exit, she noted the attentive expressions, the subtle nods, and the unspoken acknowledgement that her preparation, presence, and insight had shifted the landscape of perception, her strategy, patience, and composure having positioned her as a central figure of respect and consideration in ways that extended far beyond the immediate room. And as she stepped into the corridor, the soft echo of her footsteps reinforcing her deliberate control over the unfolding sequence of influence. Samantha felt the full measure of the quiet authority she had cultivated, ready to guide her next moves with the assurance that her position was firmly established. The evening had deepened, and Samantha walked through the quiet streets with a measured calm, the glow from streetlights reflecting softly on the rain-slicked pavement, her hand resting gently on her growing belly, each step deliberate and imbued with purpose. As she considered the next phase of her plan and the careful orchestration of interactions that would ensure her influence expanded beyond this immediate moment, she thought about the conversations to come, the subtle disclosures, and the timing required to align perception, authority, and respect, visualizing how each stakeholder would react to the controlled revelation of her insights, and how her carefully curated knowledge could shift decisions in ways that were both strategic and undeniable. The soft hum of a passing car blending with the distant murmur of a late-night cafe as she moved past, grounding her focus in the ambient rhythm of the city. Each detail of her surroundings adding clarity to her intentions, the pattern of reflections on the windows, the occasional glint of neon signage, the gentle rustle of leaves along the sidewalks, all merging into a cadence that matched her internal calculations. She allowed herself a moment to reflect on the distance she had traveled both physically and metaphorically, recalling the early mornings, the unnoticed contributions, the strategic patience, and the quiet observation that had brought her to this point, the awareness of her own capability and the leverage she held, giving her a sense of calm authority. And as she approached a familiar building, she noted the subtle gestures of recognition from security personnel, the polite acknowledgement of her presence without intrusion, and the seamless transition into a space where influence, insight, and preparation could converge. She carried her portfolio with a careful hand, the weight of the documents symbolic of both readiness and opportunity, each sheet containing actionable insight, strategic options, and evidence of her understanding of complex dynamics. And she anticipated how the controlled revelation of this information would command attention, generate alignment, and reinforce her standing without needing to assert dominance, relying instead on clarity, precision, and the natural draw of authority informed by preparation. Entering the building, she moved with a graceful assurance, the soft click of her shoes against the polished floor punctuating each careful step, her posture and demeanor projecting confidence and measured presence. And as she waited for the elevator, the brief pause allowed her to recalibrate, reviewing mentally the points to emphasize, the questions to anticipate, and the subtleties of engagement that would ensure her guidance was recognized and respected. The quiet anticipation in the air, a tangible reflection of the strategic potential she was about to realize. And when the elevator doors opened, she stepped inside smoothly, feeling the slight motion as it ascended, each floor a step closer to demonstrating the impact of her preparation, her influence extending subtly through presence, knowledge, and the unspoken authority that comes from expertise, patience, and timing. The hum of the elevator providing a metronome to her thoughts and a quiet backdrop to the orchestration of the forthcoming engagements. And Samantha knew fully that the careful cultivation of her insight, the anticipation of reactions, and the measured execution of her plan would position her not only as a participant, but as a driver of outcomes, establishing a foundation of respect, recognition, and strategic authority that would extend far beyond this immediate moment. The moment Samantha stepped into the large glass-walled conference room, the atmosphere shifted almost imperceptibly, the soft murmur of conversation fading as heads turned and attention converged upon her. Every movement she made measured, her posture impeccable, conveying a quiet authority that commanded both respect and curiosity. And as she placed the portfolio carefully on the polished table, the subtle weight of her presence filled the room, eyes following her with a mixture of intrigue and acknowledgement, the light reflecting off the surfaces, accentuating the meticulousness of her attire and the composure she exuded. While she spoke, her voice calm and deliberate, outlining insights, projections, and strategies that unfolded like a carefully constructed narrative. Each sentence designed to guide perception, reinforce credibility, and draw subtle alignment from those present. The room responding to the combination of clarity, confidence, and carefully timed pauses that emphasized key points without demanding attention. The rhythm of her speech maintaining engagement while allowing thought and reflection, her hand occasionally gesturing toward data points in the portfolio, reinforcing her points with visual cues that mirrored the precision of her analysis. She anticipated questions before they were asked, subtly addressing concerns through framing and the careful sequencing of information, ensuring that those present recognized both her competence and her foresight. And even as Ethan sat at the end of the table, glancing nervously at the documents she had prepared, the shift in dynamic was unmistakable. The subtle reassessment of authority evident in his posture and attentiveness. And Samantha, aware of the impact she was creating, allowed herself a calm, measured smile, acknowledging internally the culmination of preparation, timing, and strategy that had brought her to this moment. The gentle hum of the city beyond the windows providing a rhythmic backdrop to the unfolding orchestration of influence. Each gesture, word, and pause reinforcing the perception of controlled expertise and considered power. She navigated the discussion with deft precision, threading insight, foresight, and actionable recommendations into a seamless presentation, ensuring that alignment and recognition were achieved through demonstration rather than assertion. And as the conversation drew toward a natural pause, the acknowledgement and nods, quiet glances, and subtle shifts of attention affirmed the success of her approach. The strategic patience, careful observation, and deliberate execution converging to solidify her influence. And as Samantha gathered her materials, the soft rustle of pages marking the end of the segment, the room settled into a reflective stillness, a tangible recognition of her preparation, composure, and capacity to guide outcomes with both confidence and subtlety. The light from the floor-to-ceiling windows casting long, warm reflections across the polished surfaces, accentuating the calm authority she had cultivated. And as she turned to leave, the quiet murmur of resumed activity and the gentle click of her heels echoing in the corridor, she knew fully that this moment had shifted perception, established respect, and positioned her as a central figure of influence. And outside, the city lights flickered and glimmered, reflecting the poised determination and readiness that Samantha carried forward into the next phase of her carefully orchestrated journey. As Samantha stepped out into the crisp evening air, the city skyline stretched endlessly before her, skyscrapers gleaming under the amber and violet hues of sunset, the hum of traffic and distant chatter blending into a subtle symphony of urban life. She felt the steady weight of her portfolio in her hand, a tangible symbol of the preparation, insight, and quiet influence she had meticulously cultivated over months, each page containing strategy, knowledge, and foresight ready to reshape. Perception and command respect, her steps deliberate on the polished sidewalk, heels clicking with a rhythmic certainty that mirrored the internal cadence of her thoughts, the gentle breeze carrying with it the faint scent of fresh rain on concrete, grounding her as she considered the next phase of her plan, the calculated steps that would ensure her influence extended far beyond a single meeting. She allowed herself a moment to reflect on the journey that had led her here, the years of quiet, observation, the patience required to turn invisibility into leverage, and the clarity that came from understanding both the landscape of power and the subtle mechanisms by which it was wielded. Samantha approached the waiting sedan, the sleek black exterior reflecting the city lights in fractured patterns, each reflection echoing the multiplicity of outcomes and opportunities that lay before her. Sliding into the warm leather seat, she felt the controlled energy of anticipation settle within her, each detail of her posture, expression, and readiness reinforcing the authority she had quietly established, the hum of the engine beneath her feet, providing a steady, reassuring rhythm as the car merged into traffic, gliding past avenues lined with softly glowing lamps, reflective windows, and late-night cafes. The world continuing unaware of the subtle orchestration of influence she carried within her. And as the car navigated the city, Samantha reviewed her strategic objectives, considering the timing, sequence, and delivery of each revelation. The careful layering of insight and authority designed to maximize respect and acknowledgement. Without needing to assert dominance, she visualized the reactions, the alignment of attention, and the quiet acknowledgement of capability that would follow, each scenario anticipated and calculated to reinforce her position, the portfolio resting beside her a tangible connection to the careful work, analysis, and foresight that formed the backbone of her influence. And she imagined the ripple effect of her actions, the way recognition, respect, and strategic authority would extend far beyond immediate interactions, shaping perception, aligning decisions, and commanding consideration. The soft city noises blending with the pulse of her thoughts as she mentally rehearsed each conversation, each disclosure, each demonstration of insight, ensuring that every move was deliberate, every gesture intentional, every word carefully considered. And as the car approached a familiar district, the glow of streetlights and reflections on rain-slicked streets illuminating her path, Samantha felt the full measure of control, preparedness, and quiet power she had cultivated, the culmination of patience, observation, and strategic execution positioning her to navigate the complex interplay of perception and influence with precision. And stepping out into the softly lit street, she drew a deep, steady breath, the weight of anticipation and confidence settling together, fully aware that the careful orchestration of her presence, knowledge, and timing had set the stage for recognition, authority, and respect to flow naturally, leaving the city lights and the hum of urban life as witnesses to the poised determination and subtle, undeniable power she now carried forward into the next chapter of her journey.